Now that we've had the chance to see some of the effects of the balance changes in Ranked, who is really the best tank right now? Let's take a look at the top 3 candidates, who also happen to be the 3 tanks that were changed this patch. With a lot of old characters becoming good again in the meta, make sure to check out the GameLeap membership in the description below. Take that link to get access to a massive library of content for lessons, guides, and all sorts of other educational content to help you improve across all your heroes. Let's start with the biggest buffed character of all, Zarya. Even though nothing was changed at all to her personal bubble, her projected bubble is seriously insane right now. In order to properly utilize Zarya's kit, you need to think of yourself less as a tank and more of a support. But not just any support, a bloodthirsty one, who wants to push aggressively to use her damage to get value. You'll want to use your projected bubbles to turn your DPS into main tanks, holding frontline and corners aggressively for a quick cycle. You'll be playing the mid-range instead, and this helps a lot to manage your bubbles so you get a lot of value out of them and don't waste them. Zarya is definitely super strong right now, but make sure that you're playing with supports that can keep you up. It's really good to play into comps that do a lot of damage, but you have a chance of getting blown up yourself as well, and having a BAP helps a lot. You'll still want to frontline sometimes, but it's usually best to let your DPS take the aggression at the start of the fight and then start getting more aggressive in the middle of the fight when ults are flying and you have a lot of momentum on your side. That way it's harder to punish you and you can also get in some much needed damage to help secure picks. Of course, the real key thing to make your Zarya super strong is managing your aggression to gain charge. How do you manage charge? How do you gain it? How do you not waste bubbles? It's going to take a lot of experience. Your bubble usage and energy charge depend a lot on both teams' compositions. Look at your team comp to find the most optimal person to put your projected bubble onto. If you're lucky, you'll have a Reaper, a Genji, or even a Bastion to play defensively with. But if you don't have those heroes, it's still fine. Look for one of your teammates who wants to go aggressive, and this can even be a support. A Kiriko on the backline with a bubble on her is massive. Keep in mind that the bubble itself is also massive. Remember that even backline spammers can push forward sometimes. A Sojourn or an Ashe with a bubble can take a lot of aggressive space. But seriously, prioritize a projected bubble to start from now on. Now obviously, if Zarya is really strong, you're going to want to be good at the Zarya mirror. When you're in the Zarya mirror, look for reasons to push and punish the Zarya's bubble usage. You can do this easily by baiting one bubble, the first one, and then pushing through and killing her second bubble along with her right under it. As the Zarya who doesn't want to be punished by bad bubble usage, don't trust that only one bubble will be enough to save you from an aggressive position. You more than often will need one bubble and then at least a half of the next one, so that in case you do get pushed after your last bubble, you have a bubble ready soon. Zarya mirror is a lot of poking and prodding, baiting bubbles and trying to break bubbles to punish, but make sure that when you can, you focus other targets besides just the other tank. Melting divas and Orissas with high charge is great for building ult and pressure in the amount of positions, but the real picks come from getting an angle and backline. Your right clicks are really good for this. At high charge especially, make sure to spam some right clicks into the backline. Not only does it knock them up, but the damage is substantial. Now on to the still alive, still holding on Orisa. Orisa is going to be one of those tanks to bait a bubble from Zarya and then push and kill her through the second one, trying to use her spin to displace her as well, into a spear finish. Zarya's beam goes through Orisa's spin, so she must be better, right? Well, Orisa still obviously has an incredibly strong neutral. And the fact is, as an Orisa player, you are almost never giving ult charge to Zarya, or at least you shouldn't be. If you see a bubble, you stop shooting. You can even spear Zarya into a wall and then not shoot at all, since most likely, she'll reactively bubble to keep her safe from the incoming damage. You can even use spin to force the bubble and then turn around and escape the area. Orisa is obviously still really strong, and it is pretty boring. Orisa mirror is still the worst thing ever, but luckily, there's another tank that can still contest Orisa in a way that Zarya can't. And that's Queen with her headshots. I love talking about and mentioning how Orisa's head hitbox is the size of the moon. It's massive. As a DPS player, you can get a lot of value by just shooting her in the head. Queen, Ram, Ball, Doomfist, there's a couple more, but the fact is that you can get a lot of effective damage onto Orisa by shooting her in the head. Now, to really fuel up the arms race, as the Orisa, it's important to know that when you are exposed with no defensive abilities, you can get shot in the head. So, if you still want to keep abusing Orisa into Season 6, make sure to be careful about that. Playing Queen into Orisa in the neutral is all about jiggle peeking and avoiding damage while dealing as much as you can yourself. Jiggle peeking the corner between shotgun blasts and hiding behind it is perfect for getting abilities out of Orisa and even other tanks. And while you're doing this poke phase, you can also look for people getting aggressive, ones you can hit with your knife and pull them in for a slash combo. Remember that you can time your axe slash and your knife pull to get a big combo, getting great bleed damage, and it's even possible from around corners. You don't even need to peek. Remember to throw your knife often as well. It's the same for Orisa with her spears. Every single time you use an ability, you have a chance for massive playmaking, and when the cooldown is short, you want to spam it a lot to get a lot of opportunities to get some quick picks. Now finally, to optimize playing Queen, you're going to have to use her ult properly, and my secret tip to you is patience. Queen's ult is one of the most counterable things in the game now. Going to have to force cooldowns, at least from the tanks, but preferably also from the supports. But when you're a character like Queen, who has such a strong cooldown like Shout, it's similar to how Bastion plays. You have one really aggressive push without the use of any ultimates. So use your Shout aggression to your advantage and force cooldowns that way, and then follow up with your Queen ult shortly afterwards. When you're in the poke phase, you can look to poke out bubbles or Orisa spin and even the spear to just try to make it way easier for you to get a successful rampage. You don't have to hit 5 people, but 2 is enough. When playing against a Kiri, you're gonna have to force out that Suzu. It's unfortunate, but good Kiris will play aggressive and force their Suzu that way, especially if you're able to notice when they're doing it. Now for an honorable mention. The 3 previous tanks are all really good, but they do have a joint weakness to Winston comps. Obviously the Orisa Tor Bastion bunker is still really good into Winston. When you start playing against less bunkery comps, you can really bust out the Winston, but be careful, you have to be pretty experienced with it. And sometimes it's all about just building primal and playing slow. You'll want to pick your duels. You want to play for space and important people you want to mark. A Genji setting up is good to fight early on, because as Winston, you don't want to be jumping in as soon as the game starts. Keep in mind that Winston being good against Zarya is not just because he can ignore her and go on her backline instead, but he's also really good at fighting her for space without feeding her charge. Using your bubble against Winston's 60 DPS isn't going to get you a lot of energy. As for the rest of the matchups, Queen probably has the most advantageous one. Orisa is pretty good, but remember that as Winston you can stage and completely ignore her. Orisa shooting bubble is a waste of her time, and her team's. As Winston, you'll want to get the slip on the Orisa and avoid her entirely and focus her backline only. She doesn't have any peel for her backline like Zarya with bubbles and Queen with her Shout. Into Queen as Winston, you'll want to just be playing for going on the backline, but the important cooldown to force is the Queen's Shout. Playing Queen's range is sometimes fine. You'll give her bleed and she won't be able to be forced out, but you can build your primal and your support ults, which is a real key part of playing Winston correctly. Now, I must admit I am a bit biased to Winston since I've played him for so long, and he's not always really that good in many situations. But if you play it well enough, just like any other character, you'll be able to break the meta yourself. So look to try your own favorite picks to see how they fare against the current meta. Keep an eye out on this channel for a tank tier list with DPS and supports surely to follow, because this mid-season patch has really shaken things up. And again, make sure to check the description for the GameLeap membership. A lot of characters are viable right now, so it's a good idea to polish up on some lessons.